who's really responsible for the tough year the country has had because of COVID-19? A central debate as we go into the very last stretch here of this election cycle. Who should be held responsible? In New York City, we still can't have indoor dining. Now, a lot of you across the country are going to say, Buck, not my problem, and fair point. But let's understand that this is the Democrat mentality, not just for indoor dining, for so many different aspects of dealing with COVID-19. They just want to tell you what to do. They want to be the little moral busybodies running around saying, the science is on our side. The science is on our side. Well, as we know, it's not that simple. There's a problem that a lot of these major blue states have, particularly New York and New Jersey, but also in California. The mismanagement by state authorities is really unavoidable, inescapable for anyone who's paying attention and being honest about what's happening. But Governor Cuomo, celebrated by the libs, celebrated by the Democrats, despite the fact that he may be the single worst public official when it comes to COVID-19 response in the country. I mean, you can make a strong case. He is the worst. Governor Cuomo has a very clear answer to what's causing all the problems. It's not that he, in a manner of shocking stupidity, sent thousands of COVID-positive seniors back into nursing homes where they then infected their fellow nursing home residents, and many, many, many of them died. No, that's not the real problem. The real problem is, oh, you guessed it, Donald Trump. Play 3.
Donald Trump caused the COVID outbreak in New York. Donald Trump caused the COVID outbreak in New York. That is a fact. It's a fact that he admitted, and the CDC admitted, and Fauci admitted, the China virus, the China virus, the China virus. It was not the China virus. It was the European virus that came to New York. They missed it.
What the heck is he talking about? Is he really going to claim, and I think the answer is yes, is he really going to claim that the problem is that Trump didn't block all traffic into the U.S., air traffic, sooner than he did? Because when Trump shut down flights from China, you will recall the media and Democrat response was that it was racist. Not even that it would be ineffective, although they tried that too. Racist. So stopping flights from the country that was the epicenter, the origin of this entire outbreak, that was racist. But now Cuomo's saying the problem is that Trump didn't shut down flights from Europe too. Right. That's not a criticism from a serious and intelligent human being. But it's whatever he's got to say. Unfortunately, there are a lot of Democrats for whom it's Trump's fault is always the thing to say. That's always true. That's always reality. It's Trump's fault. That's it. That's all you have to know. That's all they want you to know. Not true. It's not reality. That's where we are. Always Trump's fault. And to say that Trump caused the COVID outbreak, how is this a thing? How is this a thing that anyone could say out loud? I mean, New York got worse hit by this than any other place in the country. Although some of you now in Texas and Florida, you've had your scares, Arizona, you've had your scares too, but nothing on the scale of in New York. And if you weren't here, I was doing this show, and as I've told you, when they were setting up field hospitals on the soccer fields, baseball fields I grew up when I was in grammar school playing on. That's where they set up the field hospital. I was doing this show, and a hospital ship went by my window. I could see it. And it docked not far from where I live. That was the environment. And we were told that there was going to be pandemonium, hospitals overflowing, people dying in the hallways of hospitals with no one to care for them, asphyxiating to death with no one to do anything, no ventilators, all this stuff. And that wasn't true. We got hit badly, but it was in part because of the disastrous nursing home decision. And it was because we did not focus on the high at-risk population. Instead, it was everybody locked down in your homes. But that doesn't work. You got to go get groceries. You got to have some people in a household who can go to the outside world, right? Or else we'll face starvation, right? Or else then even the idiot libs would realize the lockdowns wouldn't work. We don't have the mechanism to distribute food to everyone in a lockdown situation when no one's allowed to leave their homes. We can't do it. But Trump caused the COVID outbreak in New York. That's the new story. Going right into the election. Oh, how convenient. Play 2.
Republican Senate doesn't want to fund state and local governments. And that's the sticking point. Not to fund state and local governments, but to provide all the money that they did to businesses. But you're not going to provide funding to state and local governments who basically support police, fire, hospitals, and schools. It's just totally ludicrous to me. And it starts with the president. There was a headline in the Daily News once, Ford to city dropped dead, and the city was outraged. Ford wouldn't provide financial resources. What Ford did pales in comparison to what Trump is doing. Not only did he tell New York City to drop dead, Trump is actively trying to kill New York City. It is personal. I think it's psychological. He is trying to kill New York City.
Cuomo is actually killing New York City. You see, this is what you need to know. They're saying that Trump caused the outbreak. That's a lie. They're saying that Trump is the reason New York is suffering. That's also a lie. It's like saying that Trump is the reason California literally cannot keep the lights on and has to send out these absurd public service messages about, unplug everything and turn off all and let your house get to 78 degrees. I got news. A 78 degree house is that's a toasty. It's a toasty home. Dude, it's like too hot in here, man. I can't even go surfing at the beach, California. Yeah, I know. It's warm. It's very warm indeed. But you know who's trying to kill New York City? Cuomo and de Blasio, by refusing to allow. We're the only city in the world that does not allow indoor dining at this stage of the pandemic, where it has less than 1% positivity rate. Only city in the world. Why are we being so punished? Because these statist Democrat maniacs like this. De Blasio likes that he just with a wave of his hand can shut down or open entire industries. With a wave of his hand, he could tell you what you're allowed to do, what businesses are allowed to operate and open. What rights? Let's ask this question. What rights do we really have in this country now, friends? The right to property? Not during a pandemic. They'll shut down your business. They'll destroy your business by fiat. The right to freedom of movement? No. The right to freedom of assembly? Tell that to the churches in California getting shut down, fined, and ruined. The right to free speech? Tell that to the libs who control the social media outlets that won't allow even questioning of the COVID orthodoxy that changes every 2 weeks. That's how sound the science is. Every couple of weeks, it changes. Every couple of weeks, it shifts. So what freedom do you really have? Think about that one. If you live in a blue state, the answer is whatever freedoms the people in charge allow you to have. This is a fundamental shift in our perspective as Americans. This is not the country we thought we were living in. COVID has really exposed us in this way. Because now people can see, we are existing at the whim of the people in charge. And there's no alternative to them because we now have these one-party states where even if you got rid of one idiot lib, it's just going to be replaced with another one with the same philosophy, the same approach, the same ideas. And you might say, oh, Buck, that's why, move to Texas, move to Montana. First of all, Montana is a bluer state than I realized. I mean, it's red by party affiliation, but there's a lot of Democrat stuff running around in Montana. But if they get amnesty, folks, how long do you think Texas even stays red? Where do you go? Earlier in the show, I asked the question, where do you go in terms of what country would you flee if you had to? Well, let's take a step before that. What state do you think you can go to now where you don't have to deal with either blue governors and city councils and other lunatics, or deal with federal overreach if you have a Biden administration that will effectively nullify whatever states' rights you think you have. This is what we face now, friends, because we have a political philosophy of individual responsibility, individual rights and freedom, and just want to live our lives and be left in peace as much as possible. The other side wants to tell you what to do. They're obsessed with it. They wake up thinking about what more they could pile on to the list of regulations and demands. And that's why it's no problem for them to see what's going on here in New York. Oh, it's all for your health. It's all for your health. That's why they're making sure that people flee this place. They're fleeing Chicago, too. They're already fleeing the state of California. California's situation is so desperate now that Gavin Newsom is openly considering an exit tax. If you dare to leave me, and this is like a scorned ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend, if you dare to leave me, I'll take even more of your money on the way out. That's what California is resorting to. You would say, oh, Buck, but New York, California, these are such wealthy and important states. And Democrats are in charge there. Why is that? Well, because it takes a while to ruin a place. It's the de Blasio effect. Yeah, the first couple of years, he inherited a city with a well-functioning police force, a global level real estate boom. I mean, there was a lot going in his favor. It took him a number of years, but he's ruining it. That's just what Democrats do when they're in charge everywhere. You have a Democrat presidency, what happens? All of a sudden, all their talk about how they understand national security and you can trust them, it fades away because we see the results of their idiotic national security policies, bowing before the mullahs in Tehran, the disaster of Syria, Hillary Clinton toppling a government in Libya, and they never learn the lesson. They never learn the lesson because they don't care to. It doesn't matter. The results aren't what matters. It's that they think that they're just so good and smart and kind and considerate and diverse, all these things. But no, in New York and California and other states too, we're learning a very painful lesson. Democrats have consequences, folks.
So why support him? Because he says what they fear. They support him because they're scared of these other things more than they are impressed by any of his failings. Yes, I get it about Trump. You bash him all the time with the lies. I get it, but they all lie. And I'm more worried about you guys wanting to tear down the Founding Fathers, forget about Christmas, not let me say anything you disagree with, not let my kids go to school because everybody's got to check a diversity box, not pay me what I want to be paid. I can't get ahead because you got to hire somebody who checks some diversity box. And I'm scared. What do you offer those people, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris? Because that is the battleground. Trump scares them. Fear is powerful. Demagogues are effective.
They're more afraid of who will replace him. Some of what Chris Cuomo, bro Cuomo, taking a break from all the creatine, bro Cuomo, some of what he says is true. In that little soundbite, some of what he says is accurate. Though that people don't want to be subjected to the whims of the diversity and inclusion obsessed left. Diversity and inclusion is just a gentle way of setting up a power structure that benefits left-wing interests and identity politics. That's it. It's really all a euphemism, right? Some people get ahead at your expense. That's what it is. That's what it means legally. That's what it means politically. But if you have any concerns about that, you're a bad person. That's what they want to tell you. Trump supporters support him because they're more afraid of who will replace him. Yes, and they are right to be more afraid of who will replace him. If you have any qualms about Trump's tweets or about his style or about his relationship with the truth or whatever, I can understand those qualms. I had some of them myself early on when Trump was running against Cruz and Rubio and the rest, but those of you who saw what was going on with Trump from the outset were right. This was a change, a revolution within the Republican Party of someone who would no longer bend the knee and beg forgiveness all the time from his opponents, then get dunked underwater and humiliated. But, you know, they'll say, see, he's one of the good ones as they're doing it. No. Trump took a different approach, and the libs hate him for it, but it was the right approach, given where the politics of this country have gone, given the divisiveness and the extreme overreach of the left. And then we have things like this, where they'll tell us, oh, it's just about fear, you see. Oh, I'm sorry, the Democrats who tell us that Russia cheated in the last election and will cheat in this election, and that Trump is going to cause a nuclear war, that he's a fascist, that he's going to crash the economy, that he doesn't care about COVID, or as an MSNBC host put it a few days ago, Trump is objectively pro-COVID. I mean, they'll say anything about him. And then they'll turn around and say, oh, but they're just more afraid of the other side. Well, that's in part because the other side will say anything about Trump. It's in part because we see that there is nothing they're unwilling to say or do if they think it will benefit them in their pursuit of power. And there should be concern. There should be fear about what would happen if a Biden presidency came to be. Law enforcement will be on their back heels. There will be more violence. There will be more disorder and unrest. There'll be some of that no matter what, but at least you have with Trump somebody who opposes it. With Biden, it's, you got to let people blow off some steam. That's the old Democrat way. Yeah, there's a lot of oppression and historic inequities. So we're going to have to let people burn down some houses and not do anything about it and, beat some people in the streets. That's the Democrat way. That's their approach. President's right to point this out. Play 13.
This is the most important election in the history of our country. We have a radical left group going around. These people, there's something wrong with them. There really is. There's something wrong with them. And Joe doesn't have the strength. He doesn't have the mental capability to control these people. And you take a look at what's going on, and I looked at Pittsburgh, I looked at Rochester, I looked at L.A. last night, I looked at these Democrat-run cities. You look at Portland every night. They don't have the strength. They don't have I don't think the Democrats have the courage to control these people. They're afraid to even talk about law and order. They can't issue the words law and order. All we want is law and order. And I just put out something. The suburbs are coming big to us because the suburbs are next. If you elected this guy, the suburbs would be overwhelmed with violence and crime.
True. Look at what the Democrats have done to cities they're currently in charge of. Look at their response to these waves of criminality and unrest and riots. They can say that Trump is fear-mongering, but some people are worthy of being feared. What does COVID-19 have to do with you losing your home? Well, the FBI says that cybercrime's up about 75% year to year because of the COVID pandemic, and your home's title's online. So home title theft is actually a cybercrime. Here's how it works. The bad guys find your home's information, then they use a quitclaim deed to kick you off, put themselves on, then take out loans against your home. You often won't find out about this until you're being asked for payment or perhaps even a foreclosure notice arrives. You need Home Title Lock to protect you. The usual identity theft services don't do this. You need Home Title Lock. Go to HomeTitleLock.com, enter promo code BUCK to get 30 free days of protection. Again, HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. You can also check at HomeTitleLock.com to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't know it yet. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK.
Federal government training programs that are aimed at improving inclusivity?
Well, we're going to do a report. Yeah, I fired those people. They're all gone. And it was a disgrace, frankly. And we're going to give you a big report that's going to make you very happy.
Yep. Fired the people on big disgrace. All this government diversity training. I did this segment a while back about that writer at, I think it's a City Journal, Chris Rufo, who had subpoenaed the Seattle training for government employees And now this is since it's on Tucker's show. It's all over the place, right? You're seeing this conversation expanding to the point where the president has actually taken action and said, we're not going to do this stuff anymore. I got to tell you, when I was in the CIA, there was already, and that was now a decade ago, there was diversity and inclusion training, and there were all of these bureaucratic mechanisms put in place by people who are leftists, who want to mold corporate and government institutions to conform to their ideology, and it's just wrong. We should have a country where the government is always promoting race neutral. That's right. Irrespective of your race, you should be able to be hired. Irrespective of your race, you should be treated as an individual, a person deserving of equal protection under the law. Not a person who gets to complain and whine and say, I don't have enough, I want more, give it to me because of an immutable characteristic. That should not be promoted from within the government, but it often is. I remember when I was even at the NYPD, the EEO office, which is often a place where they have a lot of, they'll say it's equal employment opportunity, but the EEO office will often be the place where there's also these training sessions. Why are they paying these trainers thousands of dollars too? Doesn't it all feel like a scam? Doesn't it all feel like this is something that you do? Because if you don't, people will complain and say that it's racist. But if you're just looking at it rationally, why should government employees be sitting in a training session that costs $10,000 where someone tells them something that they could just pass out in a booklet or a slideshow? It makes no sense. No one's excited to sit there. There's no market for this. But they create a market through what's effectively a nice company you got there, a nice government agency. It'd be a shame if somebody picketed it and called it racist. So then you have to do these trainings, right? It's almost like a organized crime. You don't need this thing. You don't need our protection. But if you don't pay for it, bad things might happen here. You don't need this diversity and inclusion training. But if you don't do it, well, now you have to do it because the federal government will mandate this stuff. Now you have to do it because otherwise if you have a Democrat administration, the Civil Rights Office of the DOJ will come after you, and they'll use disparate impact theory. They'll use critical race theory in order to call your institution racist and to make it bend the knee to the will of the left. This is the whole game. This is what they've been doing for years. But now it's gotten to a point where we look at this and say, who's making up these rules? What does this really even mean? What are they trying to accomplish with this? I mean, to have white employees write notes of apology? I apologize for nothing that I have not done. That is a hard and fast rule. Not apologizing for being bored, not apologizing for being white, not apologizing for being male. No, absolutely not. This is what they're teaching in government? This is what they're telling you. Now, also think about the second order effects of all this. You're sitting there as a government employee, as I have been, so I speak with knowledge of this. And it reminds me, even in the terrorism training modules that would be sponsored by DHS, unclassified terrorism training modules, where we'd be in some hotel somewhere, some conference room, and they'd give us the latest thinking on terrorist profiling, whatever. It was always a guy named Bob who's a member of a right-wing Christian terrorist group. I mean, it was really noticeable. Every time we were doing a terrorism training, this is now going back 2010, 2011, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. There were some real terrorist groups you had to worry about. But it was always Bob from the shining Christian group of Jesus and the crucifixy cross thing is building a bomb to blow up a federal building. That was always what we were being told. And you'd say, well, this is because the white male Christians in the audience are just going to go, okay, God forbid we talk about Islamic jihad. Right? I can't do that, or just jihad because it's always Islamic. But you know what I mean. God forbid we have that discussion. Let's all sit around here because we're really worried about a guy named Bob, a white guy named Bob, who's Christian and right wing. That's always the concern if you go to these dumbed down government training modules. And we would sit through this and you'd say, okay, I mean, you just want to get your paycheck. You want to go to the real work you're doing when you're in the government, whatever that is. You don't want to get bogged down in some political fight over nonsense. But This is where we are, folks. Now it's gone to the point where it's so absurd, where it's so egregious that even the president couldn't ignore it anymore. And they're complaining about it. What's wrong with teaching government employees inclusion? The same game they have with the Black Lives Matter movement. Do you not support Black Lives Matter? Well, I don't support the political movement. It's terrible and it's ruining the country. But of course, I believe that Black Lives matter. I believe that a Black life matters every bit as much as every other life matters. As a Asian life, a white life, a Hispanic life, I believe that human life is all sacred and equal. So, of course, that's the only moral belief one can hold on the issue. It's immoral to hold any other belief. So why is the group named that? Oh, so they can misrepresent it. And, oh, well, if you don't support our group, then clearly you're taking an immoral position because you don't support black lives. What? Same thing with diversity and inclusion training. Oh, and I just learned that the D&I, I told you this, D&I, people are now going into this as a field of study. And if you challenge any of this, wait, hold on, why are we treating a new Nigerian immigrant to the United States who just got here the same way for diversity and inclusion purposes as we do an African American who grew up here and his family has been here for 5 generations now? They've had the same historical injustice? How do we, none of this actually makes any sense when you drill down into it, when you look at it and ask the obvious questions. But why are you asking questions about diversity and inclusion? Do you oppose diversity? Are you against How could you be against inclusiveness, right? How could you be somebody who's not in favor of that? But that's the whole game. That's the whole game. That's what they will continue to do. That's what they'll say. It's why they name the movement what they do. It's why they position this as something that's innocuous. Well, why do you have a problem with this? Oh, why do I have a problem with diversity and inclusion? Well, because I think making white employees separate from the rest of the group and forcing them to apologize and to browbeat them over nothing they've actually done is absurd. It's wrong. It's a waste. And it also creates all kinds of dynamics that are not inclusive at all. It creates dynamics of us and them. Right? Those who are protected in this diversity and inclusion rhetoric, and those who are the oppressors, those who are the antagonists, the bad people, white males. You know, the worst people in all this are the smug white liberals who don't live their lives by any of this rhetoric, but love to use it as a political weapon against people they disagree with. They're the ones who are truly the worst. The most hypocritical, the most sanctimonious, and the most disgraceful. The president was absolutely right to get rid of this training. Absolutely right to say the government shouldn't do this stuff anymore. And all it took was for people to see what was really being taught, what your tax dollars were going toward. That's all they had to see. That's all they had to know. And then there was enough of an outcry. This is only the stuff you hear about so far in corporate America. When you see what's going on with colleges and universities, as more of that gets out, they are brainwashing kids into just being little diversity and inclusion robots because they're terrified and they don't know any better. And they want to have friends and they want to be treated well by the administration and they want to have a bright future. They don't want to be called a racist. This is a real fight in this country, one that we're all in, whether you want to be or not. Do we treat each other as individuals, human beings, made in God's image, worthy of equal dignity? Or do we constantly play this game of, the oppressors need to be taught a lesson? And we know who the oppressors are, right?
The United States experienced the smallest contraction of any major Western nation. You probably know that. You look around and see how we're doing compared to every other nation, and our rise is spectacular, and we're rebounding much more quickly from the pandemic. The U.S. economy added 1.4 million jobs last month. We've added a record-setting 10.6 million jobs since May. 10.6 million jobs since May. That's a record that is not even close. Second place is a long ways away. We're currently witnessing the fastest labor market recovery from an economic crisis in history, world history. By contrast, Biden presided over the worst, the weakest, and the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression.
Who do you want in charge of the economy? It's a very important question, one that's going to move a lot of votes in this final phase. Certainly shouldn't be Joe Biden. You wouldn't want that guy running a hot dog stand. Somehow he's managed to just hang on and be an unregistered lobbyist for the credit card companies out of Delaware, who also happen to be a United States senator. But yes, Joe Biden versus Trump on the economy. That's going to be a big question. That's going to be a big deciding point for a lot of folks. But they don't want to focus on that. The Democrats don't want to talk about that. Well, first of all, because Joe Biden says stuff like this, play 17.
You know, all of a sudden they found out you had thousands of employees making an hourly wage having to sign non-compete agreements. So if you worked at Burger King, you have to sign a non-compete agreement. You would not go across town to McDonald's to try to get 5 more cents in your hourly wage. All designed to do nothing, just to keep wages down. You could not go. It's not like you had a secret that was consequential and you couldn't give away that secret because it's a high-tech industry to another industry you go to work for. These are people making an hourly wage, just doing their job. And they were told they couldn't even bargain for themselves, let alone have a union do it.
Non-compete agreements, huh? Unionized fast food workers. How do you think that would go? Yeah, I know you didn't order a Big Mac. You wanted chicken nuggets, but it's my 2-hour lunch break, and I would now like you to eat your chicken nuggets and shut your face. Okay, thank you, sir. Whatever you say. I don't think a unionized fast food workforce would go very well for us. Unless you really want to start having, a $15 Happy Meal, $20 Happy Meal, then it'd be fine. I guess you could go that way. But Joe Biden doesn't know anything about the economy. He doesn't know anything about how a business works, other than the business of getting your son put on the board of a Ukrainian gas company that he knows nothing about, named Burisma, and get him paid hundreds of thousands, I think it was over $1 million all told, to do nothing. To be the wayward son of the deeply unimpressive but somehow still very connected Joe Biden is a lucrative position. But they know that they can't win on the economic argument. Not really. Not for anybody who, some people, doesn't matter what the argument is. They're just like, I like Biden. He's nice. He seems like he's awake most of the time he's talking. So there's some people you can't win the argument. It doesn't matter. But there's also going to be a lot of distraction out there. Bob Woodward stepping in with a bombshell today. That's not really a bombshell. They're going to call it one, though. Woodward book says Trump says he knew coronavirus was deadly and worse than the flu while intentionally misleading Americans. This is the new Woodward book, dropped for maximum political damage as well as commercial interests of selling a book, not, of course, of bringing the truth to the American people as soon as this information allegedly came out. But Woodward, look, he's a fantastic fabulist. I mean, he's very good at making stuff up. President Trump's head popped up during his, this is from the Washington Post piece that dropped today, popped up during his top secret intelligence briefing in the Oval Office on January 28th, when the discussion turned to the novel coronavirus outbreak in China. This will be the biggest national security threat you face in your presidency, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien told Trump. This is going to be the roughest thing you face. 10 days later, Trump called Woodward and revealed that he thought the situation was far more dire than what he had been saying publicly. You just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed, Trump said in a February 7th call. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than even your strenuous flu. This is deadly stuff. Okay, so now we get to go through this one. Trump was trying not to panic the public. There was a lot of information coming in at different times. There was a lot of what was said then was inaccurate. There were, every day you're getting people, one day it's worse than the flu, the next day it's not as bad as the flu, and this is the early days of the pandemic. There's a lot that wasn't known. Just because it was a top secret briefing, as we know from Iraq WMD, for example, it does not mean that everything that was said was accurate, not by a long shot. In fact, sometimes it's all incredibly wrong. But here you go, another one. Oh, yeah, sure. Trump just lied to everybody about how dangerous this thing was. Why would he? He's the president. He's going to be in charge. But what's the difference between lying and trying to keep people from not panicking? Well, do you give any good faith to the president? Do you think that maybe he was trying to act in the best interest of public order and trying to calm anxieties while also taking actions behind the scenes to try to make sure we had as much preparation as possible for this? You can take that position, or you can think that the president is an evil, heartless monster who is lying about the disease. Why would he lie about a disease that he's going to have to deal with for the rest of the year as president? How does that really advance his interest? To lie, not to be wrong and not to try and calm people. But if you're really going to claim, as Bob Woodward is, and among many other journos now, that he was lying about it, that doesn't make any sense. We were going to see how he dealt with this, and we were going to see the realities of this virus play out before us. So this is not something the president would have thought he could wave a hand and it would just disappear. This is not something the president would have thought he could convince us was something that it wasn't. No, but the media panicked, and now the media is lying about what they were saying originally when they were claiming it wasn't a big deal, and we're all supposed to think Trump is the worst. A Bob Woodward hit. It's all, folks, it's all coordinated. It's all nothing.